we will ask the General Assembly to take the necessary step. We will not relent until we see this illegal occupation end as quickly as possible, as the General Assembly stated, within 12 months. Mr. President, what the court determined is wholly and directly relevant to the duties of this council. It stated inter alia that, and I quote, the sustained abuse by Israel of its position as an occupying power through annexation and an assertion of permanent control over the occupied territory and continued frustration of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination violates fundamental principles of international law and renders Israelis' presence in the occupied Palestinian territory unlawful. Unlawful, end of quotation. If we needed to identify two cardinal rules, two pillars on which the international law-based order was built, two principles whose respect was critical for international peace and security, they would be the right of peoples to self-determination and the prohibition of the acquisition of territory by force. And these are the rules that Israel has been breaching openly, brazenly, for decades without consequences. The ICJ and General Assembly were able to rise to the historic and tragic challenge before us. When will the Security Council, the body entrusted with primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, step up and live up to its mandate and defend these cardinal principles to ensure the survival of the international law-based order? It has been 8 years since the Council adopted Resolution 2334. Since then, Israel has ignored and violated the resolution, just like every other resolution, persisting in its breaches of the Charter, of the most fundamental rules of international law, and of the determinations of the Council. Should the Security Council give in, surrender to Israel's colonial will, or should it deploy the necessary means to ensure respect for its resolutions and international law? I repeat, as I have said so many times before, you have the tools, you have the power, you have the mandate to enforce your resolutions and to enforce international law. Will you act on such basis, or will you continue to drag your feet and appease one country here and one country there? Let me say it again. Palestinians want to live, not merely to survive. They want to be safe in their homes. They want their children to go to school without fear. Palestinians want to be free in reality, as they are in spirit, free to live, to come and go, free to determine their own fate, subject only to God and to no other. They want to be Palestinians, to be themselves, just be, neither heroes nor victims, just human beings with the simplest of dreams or the greatest of aspirations, living in dignity, in peace and security in their own homeland. The Palestinian people is an extraordinary people whose true desire is to lead an ordinary life. They will settle for nothing less. Anybody expect them to accept their servitude, to coexist with their chains, is truly misguided. Freedom is their birthright. Freedom is their destiny. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Observer State of Palestine for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. The world is experiencing a period of extraordinary instability. Yet, here we are, trapped in endless debates that miss the true heart of the issue. We gather here time and time again, like surgeons debating how to stitch a wound while the patient bleeds out before us. The longer this body remains blind to the reality, the greater the cost of the world will pay. Israel is not just fighting for itself, we are the front line in a battle that threatens the entire region and the world. We are standing firm, facing down the forces of the most oppressive regime in the world, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Council members, there is only one regime that openly, proudly, and consistently calls for the destruction of entire nations, the Islamic regime of Iran. You know, I look at you all. You are accustomed to debating conflicts across the world. And in every conflict, you identify its cause, whether it's a dispute over territory, or dispute over resources, or history between nations. Have you asked yourself, what is the conflict that the Iranian regime has with Israel? Why? There is no territorial dispute, as we separated by over 1,000 miles from Iran and Israel. No shared resources, and no violent history between us. The only reason is their fanatical ideology, festering hatred against the existence of our religion and state. Iran's grand ambition is the creation of a Shiite supremacist empire that stretches across the entire Middle East and beyond. They seek dominance, not diplomacy. They seek to impose their dark vision on the region, reshape the Middle East in their own image, and then extend their influence far beyond our borders. This Council and the world must wake up to the reality of the threat Iran poses. The dark force driving the violence we see today is not a collection of independent groups. It is Iran pulling the strings. Tehran proxies, Hezbollah in the north, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, and terrorist cells in Judea and Samaria are all Iran's attack dogs, unleashed to spread death and destruction across the region. These proxies are the claws of a beast that is not content with attacking Israel alone, but is curving paths toward the domination of the Middle East. While Iran pulled the strings, the Palestinian Authority stand by, utterly weak and impotent. When they are not turning a blind eye due to their weakness, they are actively collaborating with these very terror networks. As I have reminded this Council many times, it has now been 348 days since the October 7 massacre, and yet the Palestinian Authority, including Mr. Riyad Mansour, still refuse to condemn Hamas. You know, we met here in this hall on Monday. I listened to your words, not one condemnation. We met in the General Assembly on Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday in the General Assembly, no one mentioned Hamas from the PA. Here we are again today, meeting here. Tomorrow we'll meet again at 3 p.m. Zero, nothing. We want to hear that, to see that there is a distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. And yet, neither you or President Abbas are capable of saying that. With leaders such as them, is it any wonder that terrorism continues to worsen in Judea and Samaria? The PA's failure to confront these threats head-on has only emboldened those who seek to spread terror in our region. With the Palestinian Authority failing to act and Iran's proxies continuing their relentless campaign, The threat to Israel's security grows more urgent by the day. On our northern border, Hezbollah, armed and funded by Iran, continues to launch rockets, drones, and missiles into Israel, with thousands of missiles poised to target our major civilian centers. In Gaza, Hamas weaponized an entire territory, building the world's most extensive network of terror infrastructure. Now, Iran is attempting to replicate this strategy in Judea and Samaria. Consider what has been uncovered in recent months. Iran is flooding Judea and Samaria with explosives, grenades, anti-tank mines, and advanced weaponry, while recruiting terrorists to execute attacks against Israeli civilians. Iran's goal is to turn Judea and Samaria into another Gaza, a hotbed of terror that threatens to overflow into neighboring countries. The Iranian weapons, which are now flooding Judea and Samaria, are not improvised weapons. They are sophisticated munitions manufactured by Iran and deployed in Judea and Samaria for the sole purpose of murder. Earlier this year, Israeli forces exposed one of Iran's key operatives. His name is Munir Makada, who had been actively recruiting terrorists in Judea and Samaria. Makada had been orchestrating the smuggling of advanced Iranian weaponry, including anti-tank missiles and explosives, to carry out massive attacks on Israeli civilians. Thanks to the coordinated effort of our security and defense forces, an enormous stockpile of these weapons was seized, preventing another potential wave of terror. Enough weapons were recovered to equip a small army, an army funded and armed by Iran. Iran has transformed our region into its railway of terror. They are taking advantage of their grip, as you all know, over Syria and Lebanon, to deliver its advanced weapons to terrorists in Judea and Samaria. Iran's murderous Orient Express is operating right under the world's nose. As a result, and we heard the reports, as a result of these murderous efforts, our security forces have been forced to engage intensely. And it's true, we are engaging. Otherwise, our civilians would become the victims of Iran's terrorist mercenaries. These preventative measures in Judea and Samaria are not just an option, they are a necessity. While we have stopped many Iranian attempts to smuggle weaponry, we cannot stop them all. Just 2 weeks ago, Tel Aviv narrowly escaped a tragedy. A terrorist armed with a backpack full of explosives intended to enter a synagogue and murder the worshippers inside. But fate intervened, thanks God, and the suicide bomber exploded outside the synagogue before he carried out his plot. By nothing short of a miracle, countless innocent lives were spared. This was not an isolated moment, but a reminder of the dark web of terror Iran and its proxies continue to weave in Judea and Samaria. In the past 2 months alone, 2 car bombs were discovered and defused in Gush Etzion. A third one was planted along the path of a school bus filled with young children. These weren't distant threats or theories. They were immediate and deadly, stopped just moments before disaster. And then came the rocket fired from the heart of Jenin, which is a major city in northern Samaria, and exploding in a city nearby, Afula, among civilians. So rockets can fly not only from Gaza into Israel, but also from Judea and Samaria. A chilling demonstration of the terror that Iran and their proxies are determined to bring into our cities and into our very homes. This is why Israel must take preventative steps. We do not wait for disaster to strike before we act. Let me ask you all, What would your security forces do if they had intelligence about terrorists planning a massive attack on your civilian population? Think about your capital city. Would there be any doubt about what to do? Well, we have no such doubts, and neither do any of you. When a terrorist threat to the Taylor Swift concert in Austria was intercepted, the authorities canceled the show immediately, tracked down who was responsible, and arrested them. Afterwards, we were all relieved that a disaster was avoided. But when Israel takes the very same reasonable steps, we gather the intelligence, we neutralize the threat, preventive terror attacks against our civilians. What happened after? We are condemned. Colleagues, you have heard facts such as these before, but they bear repeating because this Council remains paralyzed by indecision. We are not dealing with isolated acts of terror. We are dealing with an orchestrated campaign of destruction directed by the Ayatollahs in Tehran. And while this body debates restraint and diplomacy, Iran's terror network grows stronger. The time for half measures, blind eyes, and empty statements is over. What is required now is not talk about the symptoms, but action against the disease itself, which is the Iranian regime. Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards must be designated as terrorist organizations worldwide. Sanctions against Iran must be intensified until the capacity to support terror is completely diminished. While we prevent their murderous aims before they take place, we expect this Council to stop them at the root. Israel will defend itself with all the force necessary to protect our people. We will dismantle every terrorist network, uproot every Iranian proxy, and strike down those who seek to harm us. The international community must stand with us, not just for Israel, but for the very future of the Middle East. The stakes could not be higher. The time for inaction has passed. Thank you.
Representative of Israel for their statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. I now invite Council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. The meeting is adjourned.